initial talk about, put their position forward and where they are. Then we'll have some questions and answers. We'll give each candidate 2 minutes to answer the question raised by the member. And at the end, we'll give them a 2-3 minutes, just a summing up, anything they want to say as a final summing up at the end of the time or at the end of all the questions that we've wanted to ask. I hope that's fine. What we'll do them in alphabetical order. So going forward, if Paul, sorry, Paul, you got your hand up. Do you want...
Can I ask for a couple of things, Chair? One is, can you rotate the question so it's a different person first every time? It's always an advantage answering last. And can the summing up be in reverse order at the end?
And the summing up, I'll do that. Yeah, if I forget, let somebody remind me, but happy to do that, Paul. Yeah. Okay. So we'll rotate the questions and we'll do it in reverse order. Okay. If Paul, but you okay going first as we're doing alphabetical order, and we'll last for summing up. Okay.
Can you give us a minute?
5 minutes. So he'll be timing you, the candidates, and give you a waiver when you're coming towards the end of your 5 minutes or answering the questions. So thanks, Paul. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Paul Holmes. I'm a candidate in the General Secretary election. I've been a UNISON steward for over 40 years. I've been an NEC member for over 13 years. I've been elected 7 times. Been on the national pay negotiations. I've been branch secretary of one of the 10 biggest branches in UNISON, Kirklees branch, for 31 years. That's just time served if you take it on surface value. But I'm in a branch that is very active, that's seen as a campaigning branch, and that achieves things. We've had 3 substantial strikes in the last 5 years, one of about 750 business support officers against compulsory redundancies. We didn't have any, and they wanted 150. We had one about children's social work grading, and every children's social worker was regraded. And we had one about the bins, racism and bullying on the bins. And we won that dispute, and 2 managers were transferred out of the bins. So we organised, and I said this at every meeting, I think I've said it at every meeting, that when you go and see the members about an issue, a problem that they've got, they only ask you 2 questions. One is, what's your solution? And 2 is, do we trust you to get that solution done? And if you can answer both of them successfully, then you can win the disputes. And I've always found that to be true. It's obviously added to high density. We've got tremendous density in Kirklees, but it's also added to a belief that the union can achieve things. And I think that, you know, the union often boasts that it's got 1.3 or 1.4 million members, and it's the biggest union in Britain. I don't think the members know that it is, and I don't think most of the activists think like it, acts like it is. So part of the campaign is to make UNISON act its size and fight its way. That we go on the front foot. I'm a firm believer in this as a branch secretary, as an NEC member. I'm a firm believer in one of the key things for a union is for every single activist to know that the leadership of the union has got your back, that you're not there on your own. And I only spoke to somebody yesterday, because I speak to our members all the time and I listen as much as I talk. And I asked him, he was a mechanic in a local authority in Yorkshire, and I asked him if he'd always been in UNISON. And he said, I've only been in UNISON 3 years. What made you join UNISON? And he said, because we called for the GMB steward to come to our depot to see us about an issue we'd got. And when he got there, he were in with the management for an hour before he came to see us. He wanted to know from management what the problem was before he spoke to the members. And for me, that's what's wrong. That can't be like that. If you're going to build and he says, all the people in the workshop then joined UNISON. And if you're going to build a union, it's done on trust. It's done on valuing each other. Obviously, I've got 3 big things in my manifesto. One is that the General Secretary should be on a worker's wage. One is that all the regional secretaries and assistant general secretaries should be elected. And the other one, I think is proving really important, is that 50% of the subs should go to the branches. Really, particularly in local government, and Birmingham is the biggest local government branch. Everybody knows in the local government branch that the activists are snowed under. You know, in Kirklees, we had 2 or 3 employers 30 years ago. We got 208 now. And, you know, the resources have to be where the election is. And, you know, and it's quite interesting, really. I've been reading a lot of stuff about the Labour Party recently from members saying, look, we can't do anything in the branches because all the subscriptions go to headquarters. Why isn't it like it used to be? A percentage used to go to the branches. And it's the same issue. It's exactly the same issue. You can't do it. You haven't got the resources to do it. And I firmly believe that the UNISON needs change. That's what I'm standing on, a manifesto of change. I think it needs a lay member. I think the time has come when the gaps got too big between the union and the full-time officers. The pendulum swung too far one way. We need somebody who knows a chalk face, who can talk to the members, and who understands what the members are talking. Conversations are two-way. They're always two-way. I've learned more from the members than they've ever learned from me, but I've remembered them lessons that I've learned from the members. It's an important election. Tried to conduct the election in a comradely manner. I think everybody has. I haven't heard much really that wasn't like that, and never criticised any of the candidates. But don't believe in that. I think that anybody can stand for any position. I think that's what democracy is about. I think it's standing for positions with clear policies and defending and publicising and pushing those policies. And that's what I do. If you ask me a straight question, I'll give you a straight answer to it, or a what answer because I can. But for me, this is a really important election because it tells us where the union's going. And it's one thing's been obvious, and I'll finish on this point. Every hustings meeting, there's a lot of people unhappy with the union. It needs to change. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks. Next, it would be Christina, but in Christina's place, we've got Mark talking for Christina McKenzie. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Christina sends her apologies for being unable to attend tonight, and she's asked me to attend on her behalf. Can I just say from the outset, I've campaigned for changing this union for so long now. Other people on this call know that, in this video link know that. But I'll give some introductions, then I'll say why I'm supporting Christina to be our next General Secretary. My name is Mark Ferguson. I'm the chair of the Scottish Local Government Committee and branch secretary in Renfrewshire, and I also sit on the Local Government Service Group Executive along with some of my colleagues who are on the call tonight. Christina was born and raised in a large council estate in Glasgow called Drumchapel. She's worked to put herself through university, took up a post as a housing officer in Glasgow, became a member of the Communist Party and a lay trade union activist before taking up employment in the trade union movement. Christina is also a UNISON member. Christina has been a national negotiator for over 25 years across most sectors in UNISON, local government, education, for police staff, and more recently in her health group. In that time, she's negotiated pay deals, new national agreements in universities, colleges, and for police staff and school staff. She has fought governments on pensions, pay, and retaining public services. During the campaign so far, I've heard some people referring to Christina as the continuity candidate. 60% of our nominations never nominated the current General Secretary, and 40% of those never nominated at all last time. Christina and senior lay activists worked on her manifesto, a manifesto that sets out a vision for a new modern trade union for our future. In her bargaining capacity, Christina has ensured local government has been placed higher up the agenda. This was evident recently in the campaign for our social care members and the local government financial deficit of £10 billion campaign. Christina has been hands-on, attending picket lines, speaking to the media and supporting her members like the NHS, the Birmingham home care workers, the Wigan dispute and the Glasgow Equal Pay Women. She recognises that much more is needing to be done on pay across our union and that it must be led by our lay structures with the full support of the General Secretary. Organising isn't just about getting bigger. Christina wants to engage in a whole union discussion about what resources and funding is required to meet the needs of our members and make sure they get it. Christina wants her members to feel that our union is more than an insurance policy, that they should feel they are part of a movement that respects and cares for each other and provides opportunity. Christina is in fact one of our trade union movement's success stories. That is why, as a lay member, I'm supporting her. From a council estate in Glasgow, attending university to one of the most senior trade union women in the UK. The working class don't benefit from privilege. We have to create our own opportunities. And that is why in her manifesto for a union with over 1 million women members, she has promised to create a national UNISON college, which will be delivered directly in regions and in branches, that provides training and opportunity to obtain qualifications for our members and activists. During the COVID pandemic, Christina has fought for employers to provide PPE, improve working conditions and risk assessments, and especially when it became clear that Black workers, disabled and pregnant workers were most at risk. She is the only trade union representative on the Social Care Task Force. In her vision for a better future, she wants to progress the work of her self-organised groups. They should not have to fight alone. It is a whole union issue. And to end, we should all work together to end all forms of discrimination. It's everybody's issue. She also wants our union to be the first point of contact for any member who is suffering. Let's dismantle discrimination, misogyny and domestic violence together. Christina is determined we have a COVID legacy, a new deal for all public services and for public service workers. Our members will not pay the price of COVID, and she will not let the government forget about the sacrifices made by you and all our members. She will make sure our union's voice is heard at the highest level of government. Christina promises that any changes to be taken forward will be decided by the members and activists. Christina has the NEC, 5 service groups, 9 regions, and over 200 branch nominations, twice as many as any other candidate. Christina has also been endorsed by the National and Scottish Retired Members, the Scottish Women's Committee, and the North East Women's Network. The top 5 trade unions in this country have never elected a woman as General Secretary. Given that UNISON is the biggest of the 5, and with over 1 million women members, it is up to us to break through and change this. Colleagues, let's make history together. Please support Christina to be our first Women General Secretary with the background, the experience and the determination to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Next up is Roger for your introductory statement.
Okay, thanks, John, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to spend some time with you this evening and for you giving up your valuable time. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity that this hustings presents. I mean, I suggested that we should have had a national hustings organised by UNISON, so I'm glad that this is going to be available on YouTube for people to see for themselves. I am really proud to be from the area, born and brought up in Walsall. When I left school, I went on to building sites, did my first strike as a 16-year-old on my own with a building firm that decided they were going to be racist towards me and not pay me the money that they promised to pay me, insulted me in racial terms, and I was on strike on my own for a week. But thankfully, people did not cross my picket line to deliver paint and paper to that firm. And I won that dispute because people showed solidarity. And I think it's really important. That's where I learned some of my principles about standing up for each other and about the importance of collectivism and about people respecting the trade union movement. That's what I've done all my life. But it's also taught me that we get nothing unless we fight for it. So those people who have been saying during this campaign that somehow I'm part of the establishment couldn't be further from the truth. I fought for everything that I've got in this movement. I fought racism within our movement. I fought racism outside of our movement at every step of my work within this movement, and I'll continue to fight racism wherever I see it. And for those people who say that they wear their Black Lives Matter or their anti-racism like it's some kind of badge that they can take off and put on when they feel like it, I say this, that we have to understand that you don't pick and choose when you campaign for equality. You stand up and you campaign for equality all of the time. And I was proud to march with the Birmingham home care workers for many, many reasons. And one of them was because I remember one of those marches when we walked down through the city centre in Birmingham, and some Britain First people were standing there at the bottom, insulting our members, insulting those brave strikers. And I stood next to those women as they told those fascists exactly where they could stick themselves and for how long they could stick it there for. So I'm proud that I stood with our members against those fascists. And I'm proud of all the times that I've stood with our members against injustice in their workplace and stood up with them when it's been time to stand up for better increased pay, terms and conditions within our workplaces. I'm campaigning on the basis of bringing the union closer to members, because when I go round the country, when we're allowed to do that, the discussions that I had with people was very much about the need that the union feels too remote from them, that what we need is a union that actually speaks for our members, that members feel that they can take an active role in. Fact of the matter is this: 90% of members last time round in this election did not vote in the last General Secretary election. In the last NEC elections, 95% of our members did not vote, and 97% of our members in the last service group elections, I haven't looked at these latest ones yet, but in the last ones, 97% of people did not vote in an election that for the people who were going to determine their pay terms and conditions. And I think we have to do something about that. We can't just keep on going as if that somehow is going to bring about a member-led union. A member-led union.
1 minute, Roger.
A member-led union is something where people can take an active role within our union. So for me, a key part of my plan is to build activism within our union, not just to grow the union, but to build activism within our union and to make sure the resources are in place for all of our branches, all of our members to deliver what they regard as their priorities within their workplaces. I hope that you'll support me to be the next General Secretary of our union and to help me to build a strong organising union that delivers for our members. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Roger. Just before we go to Hugo, just remind everybody, can you think of some questions get ready to ask after Hugo's given his speech, or please do put it in the chat if you don't want to ask it out loud. So Hugo, over to you.
Thanks very much. I'm Hugo Pierre. I have been elected onto the NEC since 2015 in the male black members seat. I'm a member of the local government service group executive representing schools, but probably the role that I'm most precious about, I suppose, is being the schools convener in Camden. During my time as a schools convener, I have won, particularly for low paid members, pay rises that have taken them out of poverty pay. Nursery nurses, teaching assistants, and most recently, a campaign that saw our school meals workers win the London living wage when previously they were paid the national minimum wage, and that was school meals workers that work in for a private company. I've also run campaigns to stop schools from closing, successful campaigns, and also campaigns against academy schools. We don't have any academy conversions in Camden. I'm standing in this election as a candidate because I want to be a lay member that takes the top post in the union to help to transform our union into a fighting democratic union. Unfortunately, I think over the last 10 years, our union has failed to meet the challenge of cuts, privatisation, wage freezes, and redundancies as a result of the austerity that's happened since 2009. And I believe our union has to change direction. The pandemic, by the way, has shown that the Tories turn to the private sector at every opportunity they can, whether it's test, track and trace, whether it's testing supplies, whether it's equipment, whether it's even the question of ventilators. All of that time they've turned to the private sector and away from the public sector. And I believe as a public sector union, there are two things that we have to do simultaneously over the next few months, never mind the next 5 years. And we have to develop fighting policies and a strategy that can win, that shows to our members that we can win. And we also have to make sure that in the workplace, we build up our organisation, our democratic organisation, and particularly the number of students. We've got to show that doing union work isn't just a hard slog for a few activists, but it's something that anyone can get involved in because we can show that it brings success with it. Local government faces major challenges. It faces a funding crisis. In England alone, that funding deficit is £10 billion. In Scotland, I believe it's £1 billion. And we have to do something to win that money back for our services. At a start, we must make sure that our branches can fight. Our branches have got the ability to fight. We've got to get rid of the archaic industrial action procedures that we have. That means that it takes 12 weeks for our branches to take action if that's what they democratically decide to do. We have to change those industrial action procedures so that our branches can respond to the attacks and the threats from the employers as soon as they can. But in my view, that's not enough. We also have to make sure that we have a national strategy to defeat the cuts. That national strategy involves uniting branches to take national action for the funds that our services need. Now, I have to say that I was part of a campaign where we discussed and we debated and we pushed for schools to be able to take national action. And we managed to win that through our union's local government local government conference. We have to do exactly the same, I believe, for our services, for our local government services as well. And by the way, you've had the experience of a Labour Council there in
One
Birmingham.
minute, Hugo.
And we have to make sure that we push Labour into fighting. And if they're not prepared to fight, then we have to put people up, local community campaigners, local trade unions who are willing to fight. I'd also have to say that we have to put massive resources into making sure that we increase the number of activists in our union. Got at the most 20,000 at the moment. We've got a lack of shop stewards on the ground, and we have to make sure that we increase the number of shop stewards. We have to increase the democracy in our union as well. I believe we need to have elected assistant general secretaries and regional secretaries. And finally, I'm prepared to put my money where my mouth is. I'm not standing in this election to be the CEO of Unison. I want to be a workers' representative in Unison. I'm prepared to stand on a workers' wage and donate over £100,000 plus of the salary that the General Secretary can win and stay on my current salary. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Okay, well, I haven't got any hands up yet, so I'll start off the questions to give everybody else the time to think about it. And it's probably one very close to my heart by looking at my grey beard. If to all the candidates, if you became General Secretary, what would you say Unison should do to defeat this government legislation on the 95k exit cap? If we start off with Mark first on that, and then go to Roger, Hugo, and then Paul. So Mark first.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, you're absolutely right. This is a major concern, and it impacts on people in very reasonable or fairly low salaries. It is a slightly different situation in Scotland that we face with a £95,000 cap. We've had it for a bit longer, but it doesn't include pension contributions. And I know the union and collective unions have decided to litigate against it. And that's underway, as I understand. Christina is, like much of the rest of us, is absolutely appalled with the situation and thinks that we should put all our weight behind that into trying to defeat what is quite a concerning and life-changing, set of legislation that will impact in people's lives long into leaving service. And I think the other thing with that is a lot of our members aren't choosing to leave service. A lot of them are being forced through the cuts. And we need to tackle that as well. But the £95,000 cap is of serious concern and must be a priority of the union. I've discussed this at length with Christina over the last few weeks when we realised the legislation was going through and the position that we're in. But I'm glad that the unions are collectively discussing this and are prepared to challenge it. And I know Christina supports that fully.
Thank you, Mark. Roger, your response to the 95k exit cap?
Thanks, John. I agree with what Mark just said in terms of the legal approach, but and we must do that in a coordinated way. Absolutely agree with that, but that can't be the only way. It can't be the full strategy. What we have to do is, in the end, these Tories only understand power. And I think in the end, we are going to have to bill for industrial action if necessary. And I think actually that's what our members are going to expect from us, because this is daylight robbery. It's daylight robbery. And we have to see, this is part of what I've been talking about. We can't just do kind of, and I'm not suggesting anybody here is, but we can't just do empty promises and just say, well, we're going to try this and run a campaign with nice balloons and leaflets and stuff and just think that that's going to change the Tories' minds. It doesn't. We have to use everything at our disposal. So yes, the legal, yes, using our political contacts where we can to try and make a difference. But actually, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. It's what I've always said. We have to take responsibility as a union for this and build our members to be ready for any industrial action that's going to be necessary. This is an attack on working people. It's an attack, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And I think we have to use the time that it's going to take for litigation to take place, which could be some considerable time. We have to use the time to build for strong industrial action if our members want to go down that route. Thanks, John.
Can we have your response to that question?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Look, first of all, this £95,000 pay cap isn't news. It's been something that we as a union have known was coming for a number of years. And we should have been campaigning amongst our members already for us to be taking action around this. We should have had a major campaign around this. Instead, unfortunately, we've just had a letter writing campaign. We haven't had the sort of campaign that we needed to prepare our members for the fact that the Tories said they were going to do this. And of course, we do need to challenge them legally if we can find a way to do it. And, you know, I can think of a number of ways in which that could be done, but we can't rely on that alone. And our legal team, to be fair, have been successful in the past, but we can't rely on that alone. So we've got to find a way of uniting all of our members in local government around a campaign of action to defeat this pay cap. And one of the first things that's going to start hitting branches potentially are changes to their redundancy agreements or redundancy settlement plans that are already in place. We should be coordinating branches where the local employer says they're going to make changes to that, to coordinating those branches in a plan of industrial action. And we should be making sure that it's not just one branch at a time, but it's several branches that we group together for industrial action. But the other thing that's likely to happen as well is that somewhere along the line, the government or the local government employers are going
15
to come back to us
seconds
with changes to our pension scheme. And we have to prepare for a national ballot for industrial action to defend our local government pension scheme from any changes that are proposed.
Thank you, Hugo. And finally, Paul.
I think we need to be really clear. The Tories are always thinking years ahead. You know, in the dispute we had in 2007, 2008, and the one we had in 2012, we lost, because let's not forget, these new proposals are £95,000 cap across the public sector, which will hit a lot of people. You know, a lot of nurses are on 24-month redundancy agreements. You know, it ain't just going to hit people who are middle management. If you worked nights in London and you were a nurse covered by that, you'd get hit by it. But the proposals for local government are draconian. What they're saying is, you know, in the 2008-9 dispute, we lost the right to go at 50. At that point, if you made compulsory redundant, at 50, you got an immediately unreduced scheme. That got put up to 55. And then in 2012, we lost the rule of 85, which said that if you were 60 with 25 years service, you could go on an unreduced pension voluntarily. And the Tories told us they were agreements for a generation. And they've come back, and these proposals, you ought to see the proposals that they're saying is either A, you lose your statutory redundancy, B, you get less pension, C, you're made redundant but your pension is deferred, or D, you've got to give some of your lump sum to pay for your pension to be protected. It's worse than what we had offered to us before, and it's clearly linked in their proposals with their proposals for redundancies after the COVID crisis. And we're not explaining that to the members. The average age of a local government worker in Kirklees is 53. Most of them will have 30 years service, and that's who it's aimed at. It's aimed at reducing the costs and getting rid of people with long service. And it's going to be phenomenal. And we should be, every member should know about it, and every member should know we're balloting about it.
Thank you, Paul. Have we got any hands up? Anybody got any questions? I'll put your virtual hand up.
John, we've got two we've got two virtual hands up. One is Sharon McCarby and one is Shelley Francis.
Okay, well, Sharon, can we have your question? Just before you start, Sharon, just to let you know, those who've just recently joined, we are videoing this because some members can't make it. So we're looking to just for you to be aware that this is being videoed, and we'll put it onto with the idea of linking it onto YouTube for those who can't make it to this evening. So those late joiners, just to make you aware that you're aware of that. Sorry, Sharon, to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that. Over to you, Sharon.
I just wanted to ask a question in relation, Black Lives Matter. That's important to me. And what I wanted to know is what the candidates were putting themselves forward. How do they actually perceive things to change? When I've attended conferences, for instance, other than the Black Members Conference, I don't really see myself represented up there. And I would like to see how they plan to make the UNISON officials at the top be more diverse and represent the people. But you've got a lot of Black members in UNISON. We're not represented at the top table. So how would you look at making some changes? And also, likewise, in some branches as well, we're not represented. And that was my question, really.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Can we start off with Roger? Can you respond to that question?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks for the question, Sharon. I think it's a really important question. I mean, the short answer could be, obviously, elect me to be the next General Secretary, and you'll have somebody at the top of the organisation who's Black. But I don't think that's enough, because I've been to too many meetings across this country of our members where I'm the only Black person in the room, even in areas that I know there's a large Black population, where I know there's a large Black workforce, and I'm the only Black person in the room. This cannot be allowed to continue. And I think we have to give some more thought to how we do this across the union in terms of increasing diversity, but also increasing the Black representation across this union. And one of the ways that we do that is we have to show our Black membership that we as a union treat these issues seriously. One of the first things I did when I came to the West Midlands, when I was the regional secretary in the West Midlands, I was part of the group that put together the race equality protocol that actually helped to give Black members a bit more confidence that the union was actually going to be able to deal with their issues more seriously. And I do think that that's important, because if people don't see that the union is treating issues seriously on race, then they're not going to take an active part. They're not going to think that the union is really serious about race equality. I think you have to be really clear when you're talking about Black Lives Matter, that it's not a campaign that's thousands of miles away. It's not a campaign that's outside of our workplaces. It's also a campaign that needs to be taken seriously within our union too. And our SOGs need to be right up there, playing an active role in making sure that the union plays a significant part. The union plays a much bigger role in making sure that race equality is right at the top of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Can we go to Hugo next to respond?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. I think that I was in one of the calls actually of your West Midlands Black History Month event the other day, and I was quite struck by something that Ravi said, which, to be honest, didn't surprise me, your regional officer, and that was about the lack of trade union participation on the Black Lives Matter event that took place around the country, but particularly the demonstrations. I went on the demonstrations in central London, and it was noticeable that there were tens of thousands of young people on those demonstrations, but there were no, from what I saw, trade union banners on that demonstration, on those demonstrations, particularly the early ones. And I thought that that was a real shame, because I think it's central to the trade unions is the question of fighting racism and fighting division. So I absolutely think that we need to tie into the mood and the movement that's taking place around the country, and arrange to meet up with those young people that were out on the demonstrations. And by the way, there were significant numbers of white young people on those demonstrations too. It wasn't just Black young people, but it was a layer of Black young people who I think had never been on demonstrations before. And so I think the trade unions had a real responsibility to be involved in those demonstrations that took place on the streets at that time, and need to be prepared to do so again in the future. But I do think that we need to make sure that we're tackling racism and discrimination in the workplace and out the workplace in our local communities as well.
15 seconds.
In the workplace, we must be developing action plans that are drawn up by Black members, but then become the property of the whole branch to tackle the institutionalized racism that takes place in the public sector. And we must demand in all the trade unions act against racism in their local communities, whoever it comes from.
Thank you, Hugo. Next, can we have Paul, your response to that question?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's two parts to it. My answer. One is in my manifesto and in my campaign letter, I've said we need to set up a leadership school, because if you don't watch it, people want to be replaced by people that look like them. And I'm really keen that what happens is people are replaced or joined by people who are keen, people who've got enthusiasm, people who've got talent, that there is no bars to get coming forward in this union. What your politics are, where you're coming from, what region you're from is irrelevant. Have you got something to offer this union? That's the first part. And the second part is, what issues does the branch fight on? The two big issues we had in Kirklees over the last 2 years was, one, the bin strike, where 25% of the bin workers were Afro-Caribbean, and they were subject to horrific racial abuse. And we got in there, we got stuck in. There was initial reluctance from the region and the national union to support the dispute because it was a Labour council. But the bins came out for a week, and then they came out and voted to come out indefinitely. We won that dispute, and two managers who've been doing the abuse got moved out of the department. And the other issue was a young female Asian councillor in Kirklees started getting physical threats from right-wing organisations to her family. And there were a big rally, and I was the first speaker at the rally. And I was the one that some of the hecklers from the BNP started on straight away. And I made it absolutely clear where our union stood on that issue. Unequivocal. Diana Abbott spoke, other people spoke. It was brilliant that they came. But I said I represent 10,000 members in Kirklees in this area, and this is happening, and we're going to organise against it. And it has a massive impact if you're seen to be where the action is. You know, if the trade union banners aren't there, then the members know you're not taking it seriously. The branch secretary stood on the platform next to the victimised councillor. You know the union's taking it serious.
And finally, over to Mark.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Sharon, for the question. I mean, Christina set out in her manifesto a number of things relating to discrimination and race. And I mean, one of the things that she's calling for is for Black history to be taught in our schools. That's the basis of starting to teach. And a number of our groups who suffer discrimination, but particularly Black history. And one of the things that she feels is a way forward is for our self-organised groups to work with them to how we make discrimination a whole union issue, so that it's not self-organised groups at conference or through the year working alone. It's everybody's issue. We do all need to pull together. And one of the ideas she's got is about building Black history into a learning programme across our union. But it's an interesting point you make about branches, because you're absolutely right in terms of Black members and the participation in our union. And one of the other things I noticed during the hustings I represented, Christina, at several, was the lack of women in our branch committees as well. That's something that I think we do need to also address. I was in some of the meetings, I was horrified to see that it was predominantly men who were on the screen. And I think one of the things that our branches can do to improve the situation is to do community equality impact assessments, because we shouldn't just be reflective of our membership. We should ensure that in public services, they're reflective of our community. That's the only way to achieve true community cohesion. And if we achieve that, that will be a huge step forward in tackling discrimination.
Thank you, Mark. We've got Shelley and David with a question, then on it. We've got a written question then from Satish. So firstly, over to Shelley, can we have your question?
Oh yeah, what I wanted to ask is, what is the candidate's position on tackling, tackling lobbying government, on the real living wage to fight poverty? And also, what strategies do you have regarding COVID? I mean, at the moment, you know, we've been promised, local governments have been promised huge amounts of money and told, you know, spend that money. We haven't been given the resources to do that, which of course plunges us into, you know, further debt. What are your strategies to be able to deal with those things, please?
Hugo, to respond for that.
That's great. That's two big questions. I'm hoping we get 4 minutes on it, to be honest. But anyway, I know we won't, so I'm going to try and deal with it in two. So on the question of the national living wage, I think the union has to coordinate a campaign right across the country, really, to ensure that we win the living wage, the real living wage, not the pretend thing that the government has set up. Which may include us taking industrial action. We have to have a real campaign to make sure that it's the bottom line for any of the services that we organise in. And that includes in the private sector as well. We have to make sure that we do that. And of course, the only reason why the national minimum wage came in the first place was because we campaigned hard for it. And I can remember the demonstrations that took place, I think it was 96, 95, 96, for the national minimum wage to come in. Of course, it never came in high enough, but we need to make sure that we include that as part of our pay claim, and that we prepare our members for industrial action ballot, and that we take national action to win that claim. And it has to be across the public and private sector. On COVID, I think there are a number of things. We have to be absolutely clear that the government is not going to give us a penny. They've shown it already, without a fight. And so we do need to have a national fight, as I outlined at the beginning of my introduction on this question. And we've seen what Marcus Rashford can do with his campaigning. I want to know, why haven't our union leaders and collectively all of the trade union leaders not been doing exactly the same? And where have Labour councillors have been? Andy Burnham,
15 seconds.
To his credit, raised his voice over the question of pay. We should be calling for full pay, by the way, for people that have to be furloughed, not just 80% pay, but we have to make sure that we're not going to cooperate with the government. We're going to fight them every single inch of the way to make sure we get the money our people need.
Thank you, Hugo. Paul, can we go to you for your answer, your response?
Yeah, it's hard to answer these two questions in 2 minutes. The manifesto is really clear that we should have a claim for £15 an hour in every pay claim. But let's be really clear. Some of the craft unions argued against the minimum wage because they said if you set it too low, it would become the object wage. And that's what it's become for a lot of young people. It's become, you know, we had a situation several years ago where we had to put a pay claim in for 5 pence an hour for catering and cleaning staff because the national wage in local government fell below the national minimum wage. And there's money everywhere. I read in the Financial Times yesterday that it costs £43 million to give every child entitled to free school meals a free school meal over the Christmas holidays. 1,000 bankers last year got £1 million. If you'd have taken 2.5% of that off them, you could have given every child in the country a Christmas holiday free school meal if they're entitled to it. And I think that people understand that. They're beginning to understand that. And I think one of the things in local government, in the coal board, in different places, that the management will get 3 or 4 times what you get. But now they're getting, you know, in some of these academies, they're getting 10, 15 times. I think we need to bring ratios in. I think we need to say your wage can be a ratio of 5 or 6 to 1 to the minimum wage. Then the wages would go up. We need to, as far as COVID's concerned, the government's only got one policy: wait for the vaccine. That is their only policy. And everything else is a pure health and safety issue for our members of work. And it's been ignored by the government. Everybody knows lockdown's going to come across the country. They daren't bring it back in. They're frightened of it. But that is their only policy. And our poor members are in the front line with that.
I can go to Mark now for your...
Thank you very much. I mean, the question, I mean, in terms of pay, I mean, we do have differences across the United Kingdom. I mean, in terms of Scotland, we asked for Christina's support in our last pay negotiations, and she backed that. And we forced the employer to pay one of the highest settlements we've had for many years, including some retrospection and the living wage, the real living wage to be applied, not just to local government, but also beyond that into the social care sector, where all social care workers, whether you work in private, third sector, or in public services, are paid at least the living wage. And Christina was crucial in those discussions and in that campaign. That was set out at conference last year. I mean, she absolutely supports that the members should determine what the pay claim should be and how we should proceed, and she, as a General Secretary, wants to back that. In terms of COVID, I mean, I've outlined that Christina, part of her day job is dealing with COVID. She has been negotiating with government. She has been pushing hard for legislation, but she's determined we'll have a COVID legacy. And I just want to say about local government, that's where I come from, and I know how necessary has local government been in the last few months. You know, if we weren't there, there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives lost in this country. We've been at the forefront of that, and Christina knows and is determined that that will never be forgotten, because local government has been left behind every time. You know, and I'm not saying this about health colleagues, they've all worked extremely hard, but it's been, you know, they've had a kind of lull in terms of the infection rate going down during the summer. In local government, we haven't stopped. We have increased pressure every single day, and our social care workers, I mean, what a job. You know, they've done so much to keep our community safe, and we must
15 seconds.
Job, a professional job, and a national social care service that Christina helped launch nationally across the United Kingdom.
Finally, Roger, over to you.
Thanks, John. I mean, for me, both questions are really about voice and influence. Have we got enough strength and influence? Have we got a big enough voice to make a difference in terms of people's pay? Have we got enough influence and strength to make a difference in terms of what happens around COVID-19? And that's what I'm saying, that we need to build our union. We need more people involved within our union, so that our strength is undoubted by these people who are holding down our members' wages, who are putting our members in harm's way, and have done consistently for the best part of this year. And frankly, this government on COVID-19, they have to be held to account for what they've done. They absolutely need to be held to account for what they've done. They have deliberately, in my view, put our members in harm's way. So what I'm suggesting as an answer to both of these questions is that we need to increase our voice. We need to make sure that these people who are in these decision-making roles understand that we are big enough and powerful enough that when we say to them, we need a pay claim, we need a pay rise for our members, that it's been determined by our members and we are strong enough to be able to deliver it. And in terms of COVID-19, that we need to stop both in those public sector employment areas, but also in the private sector areas, that we are able to stand up for our members and the way that we do that is by building strong union organisation on the ground, because that's what makes the difference, but also having a strong enough, big enough profile in the media so that people understand that when we speak, we are actually speaking for 1.3 million members, and that we can make a difference for those members, and we can mobilise those members to do something about those Tories who've never given us anything, never likely to give us anything unless we force them to give us something. And that's the only way these Tories understand. They understand power, and we have to exercise that power against them if necessary.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. If you go on to our next question, which is from David.
Yes, when UNISON was formed, it was actually written into the rule book that UNISON would be a lay member-led union. Many activists think that over the years that power has shifted towards full-time appointed staff and away from lay rank and file members. Do you agree with that criticism? And if so, what would you do about it? And if you don't agree with that criticism, why do you think that perception exists amongst large numbers of activists?
Can we get back to, I think, starting with Paul again to respond to that question? Paul, can you respond to that?
Yeah, Chair. I know it to be true. I've experienced it like all branch secretaries have experienced it. And why it's happened is one of the reasons is that the attacks have become more and more local. The branches have got more and more snowed under, and people, the activists who've gone haven't been replaced. It's much more difficult to be an activist now than it was 30 years ago. You know, people don't encourage it in the workplace. The management don't encourage it like they might have done at one time. There's the private sector and things like that. What's happened is the union has become more and more collecting subscriptions and maintaining the union as a vehicle, and not in the primary aim, which is protecting the terms, conditions, and pay and pensions of the members. And so you end up then is with a union where people are forever telling you what you can't do. You know, when our members walked out unofficially in Kirklees over racism and bullying, I were being told, well, they can't do that and they can't do that. I didn't hear anybody telling the management they can't do bullying and they can't do racism. I didn't hear that at all. And you've got to have the members back. And if the stewards think the union hasn't got the back, then they start getting nervous. And that's what it's about. A lay member-led union is about activists talking to each other, activists and the members drawing up policies, activists saying to the members, this is what we need to do to get this. And the full-time officials coming on board to help them achieve it. And the majority of branch secretaries don't feel that. The majority of branch secretaries feel, oh, I better keep my head down on this, or I want to get support on that. And it's not positive enough. We've got to change from a can't do union to a can do union.
We go to Mark for a response.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer for someone else, but I mean, certainly I would say in Scotland we don't feel that we are led by officers. That may just be the way that we are, but it is an issue and it is discussed across our union. Christina's absolutely clear in that, that people don't feel that we're a lay-led union. But Christina's committed to what she set out in her manifesto was a vision, her vision of what our union should be. But she recognises that she can only deliver that if we vote for it, if we back it as members. And a lot of this is in our hands because we should be able to use our structure. And we should use our structures if we don't think things are right. So it's up to us to organise collectively, putting our political alliances aside and our differences aside and working on how do we improve our union. And if that was called for, I would be backing that absolutely. And I know Christina would back that. She's determined that the decisions and the vision that she's put forward will only be deliverable if she can convince the members to vote for it. And she's putting that the decisions of our union have to be made by our lay members. And that's one of the reasons why I am supporting her, because that's something that would be fundamentally for me to back somebody would have to be in place.
Thank you, Mark. Roger, can we go over to you for you to respond to?
Yeah, I don't know if it's me, but you're fading in and out, John. I'm having trouble hearing you most of the time.
Oh, okay. I'll stand a bit closer. Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Clearly, lots of our members do believe that there is a problem in whether our union is lay member led or officer led, and so you have to take that at face value. I also take at face value what people are saying, that they feel that the union's too remote from them, and I think those are a part of the same question that I think a lot of our members are asking. I also think it's part of the problem of the lack of participation that we have within the union. I think that we need to deal with that. I mean, Hugo said earlier on that we've got 20,000 people active within our union. I wish it was that many. It's not that many. We have around 18,000 people who are taking up activist roles within our union, doing 48,000 jobs between them. You know, I mean, that's not, you can't really be talking about a lay member-led union when there's so few lay members taking an active role. Now, and that's not for me to blame the lay members who are taking a role. Of course not. What we need more people involved in our union. So I'm really happy I mean, the way I was brought up in the trade union movement is that members make decisions, officers give advice, officers give the best advice that they can possibly give. and members take the decisions on what needs to be done in our lay member-led democracy. And that's where I'm coming from. I believe in building a strong lay member-led union, and that includes for me getting more lay members active within our union, playing an active role, making decisions, and getting other lay members more active
15
within
seconds.
the union too. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. And then over to Hugo.
Yeah, thanks. So there are two things that epitomise what's wrong with this union, and why I think members see it as not a lay member-led union. In the first instance, this General Secretary election, when it took place 5 years ago, there was significant wrongdoing in the London region, which is a region that I'm from, and there was a very botched investigation into that. There was wrongdoing, and the certification officer said at the end of that the union failed to investigate all the people that were involved in the wrongdoing. And that to me shows that there isn't a lay member-led union. The other thing is when we look at the motions that go to conference, around about a third of those motions are ruled out of order. Many for spurious reasons, I think many would feel, on this grounds of bringing the union into legal jeopardy. And we can't have that situation in our union. We have to be able to democratically debate the motions that branches want to submit and discuss, particularly where it concerns strategy to deal with protecting their pay, terms and conditions and their jobs. We have to be able to have a more democratic structure to our union. And I would remove bans on branches talking to each other in particular regions informally. Of course, they can talk to each other through the formal structures, but in some regions, branches are banned from talking to each other. That's got to end. We've got to have a system where branches can, if they decide to do so, can come together, can talk together, can campaign together to change union policy, if that's what they're able to want to do. And I think that would bring the union a lot closer to the
15
members.
seconds.
But finally, as I've said at the introduction, we have to make sure that we have policies that are respected by members, that they feel, and a strategy that they feel is going to win to protect their jobs, pay terms and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Thank you for your response. We've now got a written question from Satish, and I noticed we also got one from Janine afterwards. So this is the question. It's in the chat, so you can see it as well to remind you. The General Secretary position is of great responsibility. Please mention 2 things you would like to bring to make UNISON a forceful pressure group in the political arena. And can we start with Mark with that question, answering that question?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm answering for Christina, but if I was to pick the 2 things that were of significance in drafting the manifesto, which was drafted directly by Christina and the lay members, then a new deal for public services and for public sector workers, service workers. I think that's one of our fundamental points that we need to get addressed that covers so many aspects. And the second thing is bringing forward the National Unison College, because so many of our members never aren't able to access learning and training and qualifications, and that's at the heart of how we, something that Christina feels quite passionate about, to enhance those opportunities, to make it, to allow our members to progress and our activists. So I thought, if I was to say, those were the 2 main things that she was absolutely determined to achieve.
Thank you, Mark. And can we just get over to Roger now? Roger, for you, what 2 things would you like to make UNISON a forceful pressure group in the political arena?
Thanks, John. In terms of the political arena specifically, there's obviously a load of other things that I think that we need to do, but particularly around politics. For me, we need a political education programme across the union, and that's one of my promises, that's something that we would institute across the union, not just for a chosen few, but right the way across our programmes of education, both online and in person, whenever we're able to do that again. The second thing I'd do is I'd make sure that that we take UNISON into the Labour Party as well, rather than the Labour Party being brought into UNISON. So for me, that's the organisation that we have a link with. For me, we have to make our voices heard within the Labour Party loudly and clearly. But it's not just about what I would do at a senior level. For me, one of the things that we would absolutely need to do is encourage more unison participation within the Labour Party, get more people active, taking our message into constituency Labour parties, taking our message into regional Labour parties, and making sure that the case for public services is absolutely heard. So in terms of the political arena, on its own, I'm happy to talk about other areas that that I've got as in terms of priorities, but those two, in terms of political areas, political education and making sure that our voice is strong and loud and clear within the Labour Party.
Thanks, Roger. And then Hugo, can we have your response?
So I think the absolute #1 priority politically at the moment is to make sure that we are absolutely clear that we will fight with all of our strength and determination to make sure that workers do not pay for this COVID crisis, whether that be through their pay, through jobs. We've seen what's happening in the private sector with jobs being ended as soon as furlough payments have gone down. We have to be absolutely clear with Unison that we will be determined to defend every single job and the rates of pay and the terms and conditions of every single member during this COVID crisis. And we're going to make sure that the government of the day knows that. In my opinion, we've seen the high esteem that public sector workers are held in over the past period with the clap for carers, etc., that's gone on. And there is an enormous amount of public support out there for public sector workers. And we've got to make sure that we use that absolutely to our advantage and make sure that that is a high political priority for us as a union. The second thing that I think we have to do, particularly in local government, is to have a real fight for local government services and for the funding that we need for all of our services. That's council services, that's social care. We need to make sure that social care is treated properly and not just spun off to various private sectors, but there's a national care service that's publicly organised and publicly owned. And as a schools convener in my borough, I would also say that we need to make sure that we've got proper funding for our school system and that we're not living on the meagre means that we have been over the years. So I think those are the two political things that I think we have to make sure that we do.
Thank you. And then finally, over to Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The two immediate things for me. One is we've got to stop being frightened of speaking what we consider to be the truth. We've got a situation now where the majority of the people in this country at this moment in time think the main opposition to the government is Marcus Rashford and Piers Morgan. And we've got to change that. The leader of this union has got to be on Question Time, got to be on Newsnight, slugging it out with them and pointing out the corruption that's involved. We've got to become a big union and we've got to fight that way. And the other issue is we've got to be honest with his own members. Between 1997 and 2010, the Labour government didn't repeal one single sentence of anti-trade union legislation that the Tories had brought in the previous 18 years. And we need to say to the members, unless that changes, it will lessen our ability to defend you. We've got to be honest about these things. We've got to stop thinking if we don't say anything, we won't upset anybody. You won't upset anybody, but you won't lift anybody. And this union needs lifting. So they're the two things I'd do. One is I'd make sure we get on national television and slug it out. And one is I'd make sure to the Labour Party to tell them that we want the rules changing so it's a fair fight. Thank
you, Paul. We've got, say, two more written questions, and they might actually take us towards the end of our session. So the next question we got is from Janine, and the question is, how should Unison respond to the climate crisis and help to effect change? And Roger, can we start that with you to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, John. I've been a supporter of a Green New Deal from day one, really. I mean, I think it's one of the most important campaigns that we need to be engaged in fully within our union. Now, I know that when we've raised this within our union, some parts of our union who are around the energy sector have got a particular view on that, and they want to just transition to to having around climate change and the impacts on their jobs, and I understand that. But we have to be really clear that this isn't just about, this isn't a small issue. This is one of the most important issues facing humankind that we are ever likely to face. And all of the evidence that I'm seeing is suggesting that we are at the tipping point, if not already past that tipping point, where it's getting to the point where it's too late to do anything about climate change. So for me, UNISON as the biggest union, we have to take a stand. We have to be really, really clear. We have to talk with our members who are impacted by this, but I think we have to be really, really clear in standing up for a Green New Deal and using our international contacts across the trade union movement, because this isn't something that is just particular to the UK. We have to have an international trade union movement response to this that influences governments internationally, all those institutions like the European Union, but also the big blocs like China and the US and their trading partners as well. I don't think we have any choice but to treat this as one of the big emergencies that we face as humankind.
Thanks, Roger. Hugo, can you have your response?
So again, I think the Green New Deal is an important feature of how we would have to move forward, and I think that we'd need to have green audits across all of our public services to make sure that they're that they're complying and thinking of the best ways, and that includes the services that have been privatized, by the way, such as transport, etc. That they all need to be thinking of ways in which they can change from fossil fuels. But this question about what happens in the energy sector is really, really important, because we cannot let those members that we have in those sectors down on this particular question. And so the first thing we have to be demanding is that there's no loss of jobs, no loss of pay in that sector, and that's the experience and expertise that's in that sector is used to transition away from fossil fuels and into the new forms of energy, so that there's the same number of jobs, the same number of people working there. That has to be an absolute central demand. But also a central demand has to be the question of nationalising the energy companies. It's absolutely clear that we cannot leave the process of greening our energy provision in the hands of private sector. We have to make sure that we do that. And then finally, the other thing that is a really key, I'm a socialist, and I believe that we need to have a national plan of production. The biggest polluters are in the private sector. We cannot leave the private sector to come up with a plan, whether it be in this country or internationally. We have to have socialist transformation to make sure that we can have a proper plan of production that involves using a green energy, green methods, sustainable methods that doesn't despoil the planet in a number of ways that's being done, whether it be cutting down forests, etc. We have to have a national and international plan of production, I believe, that will make sure that our planet can remain sustainable for not just our generation, but for the many generations of human beings to come.
Time.
Thank you, Hugo. And then Paul next.
One of the most depressing sights in England for me is Euston Road. When you see the number of vehicles on Euston Road, I think to myself, must be 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And if we're going to have a green policy, it starts off with transport. I remember in the 1980s in South Yorkshire, actually, it'd have been cheaper for the council to give free buses than it was what the subsidised bus fare. It was costing them more money to collect the fares than it was what if they'd provided them free. And our members want to be green. They're desperate to be green if they can afford to be. I was at Labour Party conference 2019, and Rebecca Long-Bailey's speech on green energy was the best speech of the conference, and it got the best reception. Our members are desperate to do it, but they're desperate to be given a leave. And I've said, the union's got to look at an audit of the vehicles that the union use. The union use the vehicles in a way that the private employers in councils wouldn't do it. They'd have full cars. We've got to look at audit of the number of flying that happens within the union. You know, the members aren't going to take it serious if somebody in a car tells them that they shouldn't be in a car. There's got to be all of us. You know, the only city in Yorkshire that nobody drives to is Leeds, because you can't get into it. There's nowhere to park. And we've got to have a public transport policy that allows that. We've also got to say to people, it's not your fault. We will set a stall out for you. But 71% of the world's pollution is caused by 100 private companies. And the governments have to deal with that. And then the public will follow on if the union and the government are serious.
Thank you, Paul. And then finally, Mark, over to you to respond.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, this is a huge question. And I mean, I think that trade unions are best placed, are better placed to obtain information and push this agenda forward. I mean, I think, Christina absolutely agrees with the Green Deal and a move to cleaner energy. But I mean, I think that Hugo made a very important point about our members in energy, because they've got the knowledge and the experience and skills. So we need to create, if we're going to develop a union-wide strategy, then they have to be crucial and fundamentally part of that, because we can't leave them behind. You know, we've got to, they're members of Unison, they're in jobs, it's their livelihoods. So we need to find a way for those jobs to be transitioned into a more green environment. But I think all candidates have said this. Fundamentally, the issue lies with where the services sit. And the provision is in the private sector. These are, and I think this is something that I would like to have seen the Labour Party do more about when they were in power around energy, and particularly the forms of energy that are causing us huge problems up and down the country. And people are dying because of a lot of that energy. So, I mean, Christina fundamentally agrees that we do need to set out a strategy for dealing with it, but we need to take our energy members with us and make sure that they're protected in whatever agenda that we set and however we take this forward.
We've just got time just for one more question, and then we'll do a 2-minute, each candidate do a 2-minute summing up of what they want to say. So the final question is from Karen, one of our in-house home carers, and the question is, as General Secretary, what would you promise us home carers on the front line dealing with COVID? And if we can start Hugo off to answer that question.
So the first couple of things, I think, well, first 3 things that are absolutely essential. You need to be, and I would promise that you would have to make sure we can deliver on protective equipment, PPE, that we would have to make sure that you've got a robust testing scheme. And we have to make sure that absolutely we have a tracing system that is worthy of its name, that's organised by local authorities to keep you safe in your workplace. But then the next things that I would promise is that we would make sure that we have a campaign to bring your services back in-house. Home care staff and all other social care staff need to be clear, they're skilled staff. But we need to make sure that we're encouraging new people come into that industry, and that there aren't the staff shortages that there are, that there is a training scheme to make sure that new people can come in, so that we've got properly trained new people coming in, that there's not this over-reliance on agency staff. I think there's 120,000 job shortage in both home care and in the other care sector as well. So I think that's absolutely essential that we do that. But then the other things that are endemic that I think blight home caring, and that's low pay, and also the fact that councils around the country have privatised those services, and we need to make sure that we end low pay. I support an £15 an hour minimum wage in the sector, but I also believe we have to bring all of those services back in-house so that they're locally planned with the local councils and the local health services as well, and not at the behest of private companies. Thank you.
Can we go to Paul? For your response?
Thank you, Chair. As I say, I always believe in being honest about things. One of the reasons that home care is being lowly valued by employers is actually the government don't care about the people who receive home care. They're not bothered about what they receive. It doesn't come in with the remit of what they're bothered about. And anybody who didn't believe that about adult care services would have only need to see what happened in the first 3 months of the COVID crisis. Now, it should all be brought back in-house, but it should be brought. The other key issue, and we haven't been mentioned tonight, is about democratic control. Who wants home care to be provided in the way that it were provided if people watch the film Sorry We Missed You? Nobody wants that to be provided for their relatives. Nobody wants that, but this government don't care. And if there's one argument I would have with some leaders of our board, is when they say, if the government only knew what the effects of their policies were. The government do know what the effects of their policies are. They don't care about them. The workforce needs to be unionised. It needs to have a good minimum wage. It needs to have proper PPE, and it needs to know that this union will back them if they haven't got proper PPE, and then we'll start getting somewhere.
And then over to you, Mark.
Thank you. I mean, as I said in my opening statement, Christina has been at the forefront leading the campaign for UNISON for PPE, etc., in social care and proper sick pay in terms of conditions. And she's on the task force, the government's task force for this, making a case, the only trade union representative on it. And some of the things she is calling for is to make care workers' safety a top priority, starting with adequate PPE and free testing and vaccination programmes when they come. But going forward, Christina wants to a universal social care service and to build on the strong foundations of the workforce who are currently operating within it. Better pay, sick pay, but more than that, but national pay conditions, training and career progression and registration for social care workers. And it should be delivered through democratically controlled bodies such as local government or some form of integration. But fundamentally, we do need to, this service is no longer a home help service. This is a professional nursing service that's provided in the community. And our members are doing that for the lowest pay in local government, and even worse in the private and third sector. And I can tell you that when Christina assisted Scotland, when we achieved the living wage in the third and private sector in Scotland for social care workers, the amount of response we got from those people was unbelievable. How much it changed their life, even that small amount. And even though that living wage still isn't given recognitions for the job they do. So she is calling for a universal social care service that focuses on workers, because that's the way you deliver better care.
And then finally over to you, Roger.
Thanks, John. When I went to work for Walsall Council in 1981, I joined National Union of Public Employees, and one of the areas that I was responsible for as the steward was the care homes in Walsall. All of those care homes at that time were in the public sector, all of them. Now it's 90+% of the care homes across the country, care service across the country is run by the private sector, and I just think that's wrong. I think if we're really talking about a national care service, which I absolutely support the concept, then it must be predicated on the idea that we get rid of the private sector from that, because you have to remove the profit element from it. You have to. If you don't remove the profit element from it, we're still fighting the same battle with just a new title, basically. And I don't think that's good enough at all. So of course we should get more PPE for our people, and of course we should have a genuine track and trace system. Absolutely, no one's going to disagree with those things. But I think what we need is something that we've started to develop, which is developing the care sector, looking at the whole care sector as a national organising priority of this union. And I've been leading on that within the union, looking at how we can build real power for our members. Now, I know this is a really, really difficult thing to do because we have a small number, as I think you have in Birmingham, of people who are delivering care, who are doing that through the council. But we have the vast majority of people who are working in the care sector, working for private sector companies who frankly treat most of our members like there's something they're scraped off the bottom of their shoe. So we have to deal with that. We have to build real power for our members in their workplaces. As tough as it's going to be, we have to put all of the union's resources into delivering that for our members.
Come to the end and the last part, where to give the candidates just 2 minutes to sum up or what key points they'd like us to remember and take away from this evening's hustings. We're going to do it in reverse order, so we're going to go with Hugo first.
Thank you very much. Now, that used to be a joke that always used to be said about me when I used to say my name, Hugo first. Anyway, that's another point. I will end on this note, really. We really are in the fight of our lives. And that's going to be over the next few months, not just the next 5 years. And our union really has to transform to meet those challenges. We're a union of 1.3 million members, but most of the people in the public wouldn't know that. In fact, many of our members wouldn't even feel the power that they have at their hands of being in an organisation of 1.3 million members. And we have to start to use that, not just locally, because I know your branch has had some fantastic campaigns. My branch has had some fantastic campaigns. Paul's branch has had some fantastic campaigns over the years. But we need to make sure we deliver nationally as a union for all of our members. And that means that we have to pull people together. We have to find ways that we can act nationally and not just on a local level, because all that means is those that are strong enough can resist some of the changes that take place, but those that are weak are left by the wayside. And so we have to have a transformation to our union. And I reiterate this point that we have to have a two-track strategy. The first is to change our policies into fighting policies for this union, that members feel confident that we've got a strategy to win. Council cuts is an essential point that we have to. We need to know that we're going to go into a battle, a national battle, over council cuts to make sure that we don't face the £10 billion deficit that the Tories have lined up for us, and that we have to make sure that we go into that battle together. I'm asking you to vote for me in this election because I believe that I've got the strategy to do that, and I believe I've got the strategy for us to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. We're going over to Roger now for your summing up.
Thank you, John, and thanks everybody for giving up your time to come along this evening. I know time's precious for everybody, so it really is appreciated. You know, all of the things that we've talked about tonight, really for me, can't be solved by slogans. They can't be solved by half kind of promises. The thing that solves these things is what I've been arguing for all my working life, and that is about building strong union organisation on the ground. That's what makes the difference. Employers take no notice of us unless we are strong, unless we've got people active within our union. Employers or the government, nobody treats us seriously unless they understand that when we say we want change, or when we say we want this pay rise, when we say you can't do something to our terms and conditions, when they understand that you can't pick on one of us, when they understand that we can make a difference by the strength of our organisation, that is what's going to make a difference. So that's why I'm concentrating the whole of this campaign on building our union into a fighting force that makes a difference, that our members understand is there for them, not when somebody sitting in London or somewhere else thinks that it's convenient for them, but when our members need it. And that's why we need the resources to be there for our members when they need it, so that local members can decide, branches can decide the best way of using the resources that are available to them. I've been an organiser all my life. I'll be an organiser as General Secretary. I hope you'll support me to carry on the work that I've been trying to do all my working life. We can make a difference if we stand up together and we build strong collective organisation.
15 seconds.
I know that because that's the only thing that ever has made a difference to working people, is when we've stood up together, when we've organised together, when we fought for real change, we've been able to win. Thank you very much for listening. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you, Roger. And then over to you, Mark, for your final statements.
First of all, thank you for the invitation to come along and speak to you tonight. It's always good to speak to colleagues up and down the country. But can I just say, first of all, we should use this General Secretary election to promote that we're a great union. We've achieved many great things as well. And the externaliser upon us. You know, branches are working extremely hard, regions, right through our organisation, we're working every day for our members, we're elected by them. So I think we should also take credit for everything that's done in our union. And what Christina has set out in her manifesto is a vision for her vision that she wants to sell to us, the members, that she thinks will make us an even better union. And she wants to, and she, you know, she's not a general secretary saying, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'll put in place, because that's not what a general secretary should be. A general secretary is there to lead the way in the direction that the members have agreed and that the members have put forward, and that's what she promises to do. And I want to say something else. Christina doesn't ask members to vote for her because she's a woman, but it's because she's a woman with the background, the experience and the determination to take us forward. And the 5 top trade unions in this country have never elected a woman general secretary. And we are the biggest trade union with almost over 75% of our members are women. If we're going to tackle and break through and make progress, then that would be a huge step forward. And I think that we will make history within our own movement. It would be a good signal going forward. And I would ask you to vote for Christina McAnea in the forthcoming General Secretary election. And I want to say I've got respect for all the candidates that are standing in this election. But for me, Christina has a deliverable manifesto that will take us forward and make us a better union.
Thank you, Mark. And finally, over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The first massive strike I was involved in was in 1989 local government strike. And I spoke at a meeting at the back of Huddersfield Library, massive rally. And the speaker next to me was from the NUR. And he spoke with a paper bag over his head with 2 holes cut in the paper bag so he could see out and one for his mouth. Because you could be dismissed at British Rail, a nationalised industry, if you criticised your employer and you were a lay official. And that is the fear that we've got to get rid of. I've spoken to dozens of health workers over the last 6 months. I spoke to dozens over the last month. And I've asked every single one of them one question. Have you ever been tested for COVID? And the answer by every single one of them is no. And this bloke says, I thought you were tested every week. And they all said the same thing. We don't know anybody that's been tested unless they were off sick to get them back to work. It's not happening. And the reason that bloke was wearing a paper bag in 1989 is the same reason the health workers tell me them stories and then say, don't tell anybody where I work or that I told you that. And that is the challenge facing the union. The world of Britain is changing. If somebody had said to you in January 2020, what are the major things facing Britain this year? I think the majority of people would have said how we extricate ourselves from the EU and how that works out. They wouldn't have said A-level results, Black Lives Matter, COVID, and free school meals in the school holidays. Them things have come on the agenda because the world is radically changing in Britain. And we need to change as a union to deal with it. And we've got to get away from this London-centric, stratified union where the branches can now develop. And if I had one thing that I've liked from this campaign is a number of people that said, God, there's a lot of talent in this union. We ought to be using it. And that's my motto, use the talent.
Thank you, Paul. And we'd like to thank all the candidates. Thank you all for coming tonight. And I think, and we will give you a virtual handshake, a hand clap, I should say. And I think we'd also, as a branch, really like to thank all 4 of you for taking the courage and the energy to actually stand for the position of General Secretary. It's not, it's such an important job. And again, for your energy and your conviction and all your desire that you want the best for the union and for the membership of the union. That's certainly come over tonight. So I want to thank all of you for that. And thank you for our members as well for turning up tonight. So thank you all. Thank you all very much for turning up. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye now.
Wish
Well
your
said,
branch
John.
real
Well done.
success.
I said, well
Thank you,
done
everybody.
sharing, John.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
said, John.
Really good meeting. Really well
Gonna miss that
organised.
now.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Bye.
Take care and stay safe.
Stay safe yourselves. Bye.